Greetings, brethren. Happy Sabbath to all of you. Good to see you. I hope you all had a nice 4th of July weekend. We were able to see some fireworks in O'Fallon at the big show that they have it for 3 nights over the weekend. So we saw that Saturday night, and then the next day we were able to go out over to the Hazeltons and shoot off some fireworks over there, and had some pretty big ones. And the kids got to participate in shooting those off, so it was very exciting. And thankfully nobody lost an arm or anything like that, but all went well. So brethren, we've been reading through booklets, our kids and us. We've been going through, every day we do their Bible in the morning, and I decided not too long ago that we'd start just reading through all the booklets and discussing them as we go. And recently we went through the marriage and family booklet, so I was glad Mr. Dobson covered something about marriage last time. And I wanted to follow up on and expand on something that is covered in that booklet. Please turn over, if you will, to Proverbs 22. As we know, parents have a vital responsibility to teach their children God's laws and way of life. Of Abraham, God said, and I'll just refer you to Genesis 18:19, God said, "For I have known him, in order that he may command his children and his household after him, that they keep the way of the Lord, to do righteousness and justice, that the Lord may bring to Abraham what he's spoken to him." That is the promise of becoming a great nation, a blessing to the world. So that depended on Abraham instructing his children in righteousness. Of course, we're told in Deuteronomy 6:6-7, another reference I'll give you, "And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them," there's the commands, "and you shall teach them diligently to your children, shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up." Now, this is a wonderful foundation, but of course the question that we have is, will the children continue in these ways if they are raised properly? And this brings us to the issue of a well-known verse that is not so well understood. Proverbs 22 and verse 6. You can read it here. Proverbs 22 verse 6 in the New King James says, "Train up a child in the way he should go," and some versions have "in the right way, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." So, the way we normally read that, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." How are we to understand this verse? Are parents always at fault when their adult children stray? Brethren, what does Proverbs 22:6 about children staying on the path of training actually mean? What does this verse actually mean? And I've titled this, "The Train Up a Child Conundrum." The Train Up a Child Conundrum. There's an article I found on the web that I thought was a very good short piece on this. It's titled, "Is Proverbs 22:6 a promise for parents?" It's by Jonathan Aiken, A-K-I-N, dated March 23rd, 2015 at cbmw.org. It asks the question, is Proverbs 22:6 a promise? Many Christian parents, he says, feel guilty when their children do not turn out right. They ask questions like, what did we do wrong? What else could we have done? What is more problematic is that the guilt so many Christian parents feel finds its root in the Bible. After all, Proverbs 22:6 states, "Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he's old, he will not depart from it." This verse has produced much shame in Christian parents because it seems to promise that if parents will raise their kids in the right way when they're young, then when they're grown, they will continue to live the right way. And if you do not raise your children in the right way, then they will live the wrong kind of life. The logic seems clear and straightforward. If you have grown children who did not turn out right, then you must not have raised them right. So, added to the heartache of a child not walking with the Lord is the biblical condemnation of your parenting. Is that really what Proverbs 22:6 teaches? Okay, let's think about this for a moment. Who is the best parent of all? The best teacher? That is easy. God. He is the perfect parent, the perfect teacher. He taught the angels. Most continued in the right way, but a lot didn't. He taught Adam and Eve, but they turned astray. So, if the perfect parent had his children go astray, there's clearly a problem in the way that some understand this proverb. Consider also the author or collector of so many of these proverbs, Solomon. He was raised in the right way by David. He mentions that early in the book of Proverbs. But when he was old, his heart was influenced by his many wives into turning to other gods. Was he a walking contradiction to the very proverb about training up a child in the right way and him not leaving that way? I mean, he did. He went astray when he was old. In fact, first, let's think about this again. We want to note about Proverbs that they are general principles that apply in particular circumstances. That's why we see one verse that says, answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own eyes. And the next verse says, do not answer a fool according to his folly, lest you be like him. You have to be wise in applying the proper proverb for a situation. You have to be discerning in that sense. Now this one, Proverbs 22:6, seems more like a guarantee of an outcome. But we should probably look at it more as a general truth, that this is describing the way things will normally go rather than being an absolute promise of outcome, because we can see that it didn't go the way you might think in that sense for God. But there's more to this. I mean, there's more to what is going on here, I think, as far as what this proverb is actually saying. We covered this in the booklet very briefly. We also discussed this in the Bible reading program commentary. And we noted that there's an inclusio here that is a self-contained section. If you look at Proverbs 22, and you can look at verses 6 and 7, it says, train up a child in the way he should go. When he was old, he will not depart from it. The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. And that seems to be parallel to what's mentioned later in this chapter. Verse 15, foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. The rod of correction will drive it far from him. And verse 16, he who oppresses the poor to increase his riches, he who gives to the rich will surely come to poverty. There's an issue here that these are border verses, and the things in between here are sort of a unit, that there's an arrangement throughout Proverbs of little collections within the whole collection. And they seem to sometimes be set off by these little things that are parallels that show you that what's in between is meant to go together. Now, what we noted in the booklet on this, a few different ways to understand this proverb. And what it says in the booklet is, in the sidebar, Proverbs and Proper Training, is this. One verse we should consider in dealing with our children is Proverbs 22:6. It appears in the New King James Version as, train up a child in the way he should go. When he is old, he will not depart from it. We can draw an obvious direct conclusion from this translation, that proper training will pay off in the long run. This is certainly valid. It's normal for most children to grow up with and ultimately adopt values and standards similar to their parents. That is, if the parents do a reasonable job of bringing them up. And they do have that job. Sometimes, especially when their children are teenagers, parents feel as if they're not getting through. They may wonder whether all their efforts are wasted, but experience shows that if they stick with a good game plan, they will finally realize the desired results. Some Bible scholars offer an alternate explanation for the intent of this verse. That is, that the way he should go refers to each child's ability and potential. The root word for way, they note, also has to do with the inclination of a tree, which can break if one tries to rebend it. They also note that the original Hebrew wording refers to his way, the child's way, rather than the way. And I want to stress that. Where it says, train up a child in the way he should go, that is not what it actually says in the Hebrew. It doesn't also say the right way. A lot of people will say, train up a child in the right way. The word right is not there. What it says is, train up a child in his way, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. That's what it actually says, in his way. With that in mind, some translate the verse, train up a child according to his bent. because they're thinking about like the bending of a tree, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. In other words, wise parents should recognize the aptitudes and interests of each child and train him to best use his abilities to reach his potential. Whether this is the intended meaning, it represents another valid approach. I mean, both things are true. If you do a good job of training them, most likely they're going to do well. But also if you train them according to what suits them, their talents, and what their learning style is. Everybody's unique. And if you work according to that, it's going to have a positive outcome. Parents should enable their children to develop their natural talents and abilities. Too often, a father or mother will attempt to force children to do the same things they do or be what they are. Sometimes parents want to live vicariously through their children, pushing them to achieve what they wanted to do but couldn't. And we need to recognize our children's distinct God-given abilities, then work to help them fulfill their potential. But still others understand, and I'm going to be up front here, this is what I believe is what we explain here. The latter translation to mean that if we train up a child in his own way, train up a child in his way, that is in his own way, that is through continually allowing him to do whatever he wants and always get his own way, that he will be stuck in that wrong way of thinking and living for the rest of his life. The verse would then be a warning to parents against coddling and failing to discipline. And this concept too is certainly valid. And actually, that kind of goes along with what's mentioned later here in the chapter, where it says foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of correction will drive it far from him. I want to note what else this article by this Aiken article says. He said, instead of being a promise that if you do right, then your kids will turn out right, it's a reverse promise, a warning that if you do not correct your children when they are young, then they will run amok, wanting their own way as an adult. If you give a child his way when he is young, then when he is old, he will insist on having his own way. And this translation best fits with the flow of Proverbs that teaches children are foolish by nature and need to be corrected. And he quotes a few verses here. One of the verses he quoted is in Proverbs 29. If you flip over there real quick, Proverbs 29 and verse 15. Proverbs 29, verse 15 says, the rod and rebuke give wisdom, but a child left to himself brings shame to his mother. Notice that. So if you leave the child to their own way, that will bring shame. So in other words, you don't want them to be trained up in their own way. You want them to be trained to a different kind of a way. And by the way, this issue of the rod, I mean, that is just as an example of correction. That's not, as we teach, that's not the primary immediate method of correction. I mean, that's just a symbol also of discipline. But that's not to say that there isn't a place for that. But of course, we want to make sure we're not resorting to that first or being abusive or anything like that. God certainly is very gentle with us, but God does chastise as well. Now, what this article says is, the clear warning of Proverbs, despite Disney's messaging, is that following your own heart or your own way is the epitome of foolishness. That is why Proverbs says that the parent's role is to correct their children's natural foolishness. And so Proverbs 22:6 is a warning that parents must discipline their children's foolish character before it is set. And it has more to say about that. It's a very interesting read. But no, brethren, parents are not always at fault when their adult children stray. Despite God's own parenting, his created children strayed. Of course, parents do have a duty to properly rear children and must not neglect that duty, or they will indeed bear a certain level of responsibility for the eventual outcome. But people will also have other influences and make their own choices. The Bible gives many positive steps for parents to follow in teaching their children. It also warns against the consequences of spoiling children. Of course, God is in the redemption business. And even if we've made mistakes, God has a plan for dealing with it all. He is merciful and good, and I believe many who have strayed will yet return to God. Let's continue looking to him to ultimately work it all out.